a little bit about yourself and why you're running for county auditor.
Okay. Well, as I said in the form, I am an Arlington alumni. I graduated from Arlington High School in 91. And, I'm running for auditor because I feel like the office could be so much more. And I actually know that it can be because I worked there for 12 years. Right. And so I know the possibilities. I'm just not seeing them happen. And so for me, it's become a mission of mine to make sure that, we're getting the services that we deserve and expect, and that we're being allowed to participate in processes that we're eligible for. And really, the office is so amazing, and the people there are amazing. It can do so much more. And I think that's based on leadership style, as opposed to and a willingness to provide those services. Yeah. So it's so interesting because most people don't know what the auditor's office does, and so it becomes a matter of, like, when I ran 4 years ago, it was all about, okay, let's talk about what the auditor's office does. And there's 4 divisions and what those 4 are. And this year, in running again, because I barely lost.
Yeah.
Like, I hope people remember that. I barely lost with no name recognition or anything, and I'm coming back even stronger this time. But this year, I want to talk more about what we could do, what we're not doing, and how we can get there, because I don't know, like, I turned 50. I'm a little sassy this time around, and I as a voter and a community member, I feel like it's my turn to stand up and say, quit putting the blame on me as a voter. Quit saying that I'm apathetic and that I'm not participating and that I'm not doing all these things that you expect, when I'm looking to leadership to demonstrate that my voice is heard, that my voice is valuable, that it's so easy to participate, and why my participation matters in the development of my community. And that's not what I'm seeing.
Right.
And so this year I'm all about, like, let's talk about this. Why are we important? How are we developing our communities? We saw at the forum where we have the mayor and the school board and the council members, and it's like every one of those people affects our lives every day. It's so important to vote. For all of these things, and I think we forget that. If we're parents, if we're busy, we're working a lot, it's very easy to prioritize kind of like our Facebook feed. Those that we interact with come up to the top, and we forget these other things because it's not being brought up. Hey, this is important. This is you. This is your community, your future, your development, your kids. And so we need leadership that's going to continue to have that discussion.
Yes, I like that a lot. And I think that you make a good point, because we forget about it until election year. And then election year, we're like, oh my gosh, I have all these opinions about how this person didn't do the right thing or whatnot, and or how it could be done differently. And not often do we have those consistent conversations of, well, actually, it's not that person. You should get to know your city council member, or you should get to know this person, or whatnot. And it might be easy, per se, to engage, but how and why? And why do I want to engage? Make me want to,
Right. Well, and it's scary.
Yeah.
And I've heard from a lot of people, well, I'm afraid to call. I don't know what to say. I don't know enough about the position, or I'm just too busy to do that. And for me, I'm very outgoing. Like, I'll talk to you at the grocery store if you if you're standing in front of me. But I think that's important because, we're coming back into a time where we want connection. We want to feel like we're part of something. We want to engage again. And so we have to really look at those systems that we have available for that. And it is hard. It's hard to call. And I give out my number, and I tell people, you can call me anytime. And I will pick up the phone, and people have called with questions, and they're like, is this really Cindy? I'm like, it's me. That's my number.
I'm sitting on my couch right now.
And I love to talk about it. I have gotten some amazing input from people in my school district that wanted to talk about how the school district could engage more. I've gotten had phone calls with people that wanted to talk about voter participation, licensing, and recording. And so every time you have a conversation with a candidate, you get to hear what their perspective is and their experience, but also who they are as a person. Yes. What do they value? Yeah. Do they value your input? Do they value your ideas? And I think, how do we get to a point where everybody feels comfortable calling those phone numbers? We give them in the voter pamphlet. We give them out on our literature and our websites. Just call. Just call us. Ask. Yes. I love that. Right. I love that.
I think that, and that's kind of part of the point of these, is that we have to get to know each candidate as a human, because one, we need to work on, as community members, humanizing these folks that are representing us, and also knowing that if you're faced with a hard decision, you're gonna think about your solution from all of your experience, who you are as a person, what are your values, while also considering obviously what the community wants and what your role is, expecting of you. But at the same time, we all have these perceptions and biases that are inherent in who we are, and so we have to get to know folks and are you passionate? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? Where are the gaps? And all of that. And so the excitement is obvious with you. So I love that.
Thank you. I sometimes have to tone that down in the morning before noon. So
check to make sure people have their coffee.
Right. Are you a morning person? Is this okay? Should I? And I feel like, and it could just be me. So it's okay if it's just me. But I think that as voters, we should be holding our electeds and our candidates to a very high standard. I mean, I have a master's degree in adult education and a law degree from Seattle U.
Right.
You better believe I expect you to hold me to the highest level.
Right.
In regards to using that education to support our communities. Right. And that's okay. I did that. I went and I made those accomplishments happen. And I expect to use it. So look at your leadership. Are they using the tools they have? Are they, do they have the vision and the passion? Are they developing a future, or are they just doing status quo, taking the check and hoping for another 4 years?
Right.
That's not helpful for any of us. I think that we as community members, we have goals for our own communities. We have paths that we want to go on. We have development we want to see done, and we're constantly changing and adapting and moving ahead, and your leadership has to reflect that and have that ability.
Right. Yeah. Totally. How do you think that the Office of the Auditor impacts small businesses?
Well, there's a few different ways. I mean, so you've got licensing, which is so you have licensing services as well. Those are small local businesses. You have them here. But I also think that the auditor's office is tied into a number of things. So, for example, I'm part of Best Schools Marysville. We lost our school levy last year, but we got that passed this year. And one thing we did was we went out to the business community and we said, hey, bonds and levies affect the school districts asking for them. That's your fire districts ask for them, your hospital districts, all of that. It's all that money. But small businesses have a role to play in that support as well, because when we have strong hospitals and schools, we bring in more business and we have more opportunities created. But they're all tied together. And so in the auditor's office, you can be looking at your licensing subagents, that kind of thing, recording with documents for property and whatnot as well. But really it comes down to, anytime an area is passing a bond or a levy, no matter what type it is, that's also going to affect the businesses, and the business support of that helps the development in that community. So small businesses in particular are extremely important because they help kind of set the development path. What are we, when downtown Arlington was revitalized, what came in? a bunch of businesses that were different, and restaurants and things that people really enjoy, and it brings people here, and they love to go down Main Street, especially on Super Saturday, and it creates, I don't know, it like creates the heart of Arlington. Like, you can feel it, and people love to come to the markets, and that's all that small business creativity coming into town. And I'll tell you, I said I was alumni from here. I still won't go to McDonald's. I'm sorry. I take my kids to the fountain, and I'm still wishing Rotten Ralph's was here for the Butterbrickle ice cream.
Yes.
But, when I look at Arlington and how it's really grown, I attribute that to the small businesses that have come in and been able to really thrive here. And I live in Marysville, and I'm hoping that happens in Marysville too.
Yeah.
We have a very strong business community, but we're really looking at enhancing that as well.
Yeah. Have you been to the Snohomish museum?
No.
Okay, you have to go because they have the Rotten Ralph sign.
Do they?
Yeah, it's downstairs, so you have to make sure to go.
Okay, I'm gonna go.
We decided to be visitors in our own town a few weeks ago. You know what? We're gonna be tourists for a couple of months. And so our first stop was the museum, and we spent hours there. It was amazing. So, and my husband took a picture of the Rotten Ralph sign because he's like, "Oh my gosh, this is wonderful." So you'll have to go.
Oh, well, I'll have to go see. So many good times there. I mean,
that's what I hear.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was fun. In high school, that was often
the spot.
First jobs. And, so the high school kids, it was their first job, and we would go there, and it was actually a place where like many generations came to hang out. So the high schoolers would come there and hang out, and then retired people would come and have their burger, and Butterbrickle ice cream is my favorite, and they were the only place that had it. And so
awesome. That's wonderful.
Good memories.
Yes, it sounds like it. Well, when you're talking about the small businesses too, I don't think I ever really even thought about how much sort of levies and bonds and things like that really impact us. And you said it so eloquently, because when those healthy hospitals and schools come in, not only does it bring more people, but it brings more engagement with businesses and in terms of buying their product, the ability to afford those things. If good jobs come in, then that means more ability to spend your money locally. It might be a little bit more expensive than going to Costco or to whatever, but you're spending it locally and giving your money to somebody that you know, which is really, really special. So thank you for explaining it that way. It's super, super helpful. What are some things I feel like you have so much creativity when you're looking at this, and so much potential for the auditor's office. What are some things that, what would be your sort of maybe top 3 things that you would maybe start to work on potential-wise?
Just 3, huh? I think top 3, definitely the education and voter engagement. And I say that because I'm disappointed in hearing the excuses about voter participation, and that's just me again. That's that high bar.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that, COVID is what took us down. That's not true. You guys, we had low voter numbers before COVID. We had low numbers during COVID. We had low numbers after COVID. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with leadership. Because we're going to not blame our voters. Don't blame me. Don't blame me if I don't trust the system or I don't understand the system. That's the role of auditor, is to ensure that you're getting the education and that they're building that trust.
Yeah.
So, and I demonstrated in Marysville with the Best Schools Marysville and that school levy. When we went out to the community and we talked about why levies were important and how they interacted with realtors and medical professionals and small business, and went to the parents and talked about the future for their kids and the future community, because those kids are going to build our community. They're going to build our buildings. They're going to provide our services. When we had that educational component of why it was important, we had the biggest turnout the school district has ever seen on a February election. I mean, like,
you're giving me goosebumps.
It's like, in a February,
right?
Like, who votes in a February, right? I know we're all going to vote more in these February elections. So to me, that makes it seem like, okay, if I can engage and I can educate and I can bring the community together to understand an issue and how it's working. But we haven't seen that in the past. Right. Then that's leadership style. That's not circumstance. Yeah. It has everything to do with what you're bringing to the issue. And I do think that there's educational gaps that we have. So our high schoolers aren't getting the interaction that they need. We were just at the Snohomish High School candidate forum, which I'm going to tell you, I'm seriously promoting in every high school.
Oh my gosh.
I want all the high schools to have their own candidate forums. We're going to work on this over the next 4 years.
What an amazing idea.
Yeah. And I asked, because I can't just follow the rules in these candidate forums. Yeah, right. I just can't follow the rules. I got to ask the kids a question. Yes. And I asked if there was something that we as auditor could do to help them understand the process and bring them back to the table as a voter. What could we do? It could be anything. And one of the young men raised his hand and he said, if you came into the classroom and showed us what it looked like and how it worked, that would help us reduce kind of our anxiety of this process that we've never participated in. Yeah. And I was like, because we should be doing that, because we should be engaging at the high school level, because that normalizes it. Right. As you talk about it throughout the years in high school, then, and I still have to do this, but there's morning announcements to send out, and then you're normalizing the process because they're hearing about election process every time it comes around. Yeah. And I think that when we're engaging like that, it takes away the anxiety of not knowing the process. It's in a safe environment. Right. They're with their peers. Right. Everybody's seeing it. And then you can kind of check in. Did I get this right? Did you see this? Did you do that? But I also think it's very interesting if you have them vote on a topic and then have the last election results be what ballots got counted. So if you only had 13%, then only 13% of the class votes get to count and you get to see whether you got it passed or not. Ooh. And I think having that visual of, okay, so we've taken these ballots and we've opened them up, we've talked about them in the process, now we voted it and we turned it in, but only 13% of you actually participated. So let's take the 13% and see what the outcome is. And is that what you really wanted? You know, is that reflective of everybody's voice and their participation? I think being able to see it really brings it to the, oh, but I want my voice heard. I wanted that candy bar to win, or I didn't want that curfew. Right, yes. You know? I think it's engagement like that, where, you know, we need to make it welcoming. Yeah. So, yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah. I think engaging with youth is, you know, we talk all the time about, you know, the war on drugs or this or that or whatever, but what we often forget is that we have to start with our youth, because they're at the very forefront of it. They can be prevention. They can be all the things for enhancing, you know, voter turnout or engagement with your community. That was terrifying to me when I was a kid. And I think my grandma was like, no, you need to be a registered voter with second you turn 18. And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. What do you mean? Right. So I probably wouldn't have had she not been like, no, we're doing this. Well, and you think about it. I mean, I have 2 kids that just graduated from high school, and they are so passionate. Oh my gosh, they are so passionate about their own topics, completely different topics. And what do we do with that passion? Yeah. And when they sit in it, they feel it, they want to engage, and they're looking for a method of safe engagement. What better way than to vote? Yeah. And so I think that we have to come back to that. And I think there's other ways too. I mean, I think that When we don't provide materials in different languages, I think we create barriers. There's a Herald article that just came out today about not providing ballots in Spanish. And I feel like when our leadership doesn't make the choice to engage with that and provide that, you are just creating another barrier to another group that you're going to say is apathetic and isn't participating, and we don't need it because they're not here anyway, when in fact, perhaps providing those materials would create more engagement, because when we understand something in our primary language, we're much more part of it.
Right.
And so I look at that and I'm like, well, that's kind of a catch-22. I mean, you're saying it's not needed, and it's not provided, and I'm saying provide it, and then you'll see the need.
Yeah, and it can't be that hard.
It's
right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because
it's not rocket science.
When I looked at those numbers, I was like, what? I mean, you put a value of $15,000 on the Latinx vote, and then said it wasn't valuable.
Woo.
And so you opted to not offer it.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it comes down to, in 2019, the big topic was about ballot boxes, and not providing ballot boxes. Dug his heels in, not going to provide the ballot boxes, and then put them in just the cities. And I was like, but rural voters need those ballot boxes almost even more. Yeah, because you're not going to drive an hour and a half from Darrington to get your ballot into the Arlington box if you got home at 6:30 and then realized, oh shoot, the post office closed at 4 and there's no box. And the response was, well, there's more people here. And I was like, so you're saying that the votes are unequal? Yeah, that's inequality, and you can't have that. You can't support that at the top. And back then, it was also about the providing things in Spanish. And so here we are 4 years later, and ballot boxes are in. They're not all ADA compliant, which is also kind of hard, because it's like you put it there and people want to drive up, but we still have to get out of our cars to do that. So yay for the box, but way to not hit the 100 mark and make it 100% accessible. To me, that's hard. Like, okay. That's kind of a, but I think that we're back to the same issues of just not providing, not making it accessible, there's all these things that just haven't happened. And we're here again another 4 years, and it's like, if you're not going to take the time to do it right and do it well, get out of the way. Like, it's possible, right? Because it is possible, and people don't just wake up one morning and decide that they're not going to trust the system. They don't wake up and be like, well, I think I'm just never going to participate again. They've had experiences or not gotten the information they need or not gotten the answers that they need. And so it becomes a matter of, well, elections in particular are easy when nobody participates. Right. What a horrible thought. That is. What a terrible thought, right? And so instead, let's make sure that everybody that's eligible is getting them in and being part of that process, and then looking at what we can do more.
Right. Yeah. I think so. I work with a lot of folks who, for one reason or another might not be eligible to vote. Right. And so, and obviously every vote, right, is important. So sometimes it's like, what are we even doing for folks who could become eligible through a little bit of effort and work? And what do those opportunities look like? Where's the education for that too?
Let's talk about that.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that, because like I said, I have a law degree, so I do love the law. I actually love compliance. Both of my careers have been in compliance, so I absolutely love compliance. But one thing, and again, that Herald article that came out today about the Spanish, it talked about citizenship and achieving citizenship. And I think that's an important discussion to continue having, because most people don't know that in order to go through the ceremony, you have to go to Tacoma. I don't know if everybody wants to drive to Tacoma.
I sure don't.
No. Or east of the mountains. And so I have asked before, like, what would it take for us to get that opportunity up here? Seriously? I mean, we're Snohomish County. We're right in the middle. We're up above Seattle. The fact that people are having to drive from Whatcom County all the way to Pierce County to go through that ceremony and complete that process, that's a hurdle.
That is a huge hurdle.
Yeah. And celebrate?
Seriously.
Why not have it here and celebrate that people have completed this process and taken those steps, because it is not easy.
No, it's not.
And it's a huge celebration. And I think it meets the needs of a few different groups, where we have some people saying, well, we don't want ineligible voters. You're right, we don't. We want everybody, that's eligible to be participating. But let's look at that eligibility and how do we make it happen?
Right.
Because we want people to be eligible. We want people to have their citizenship here and bring what they can to the communities. And it's just a different way of looking at it. It's a way of opening your arms and saying, yes, come, how do we make this happen for everybody so that we can continue to move forward versus, well, when you get that done, come back to me.
Yeah. And also, it makes me think of, what are our eligibility requirements? Like, where do they come from? Whose idea was this? I think a lot about, incarceration status, in our justice system, and all the things that we're doing in that aspect, that what makes someone ineligible and why? And what, truly why? Like, is this really fair?
Right. Well, and also, to bring it back to the education, there was about 5 years in there, in 2015-ish, where the laws about people with felony convictions voting changed. It was like it changed every year. By the end of it, nobody knew what was going on, and everybody was scared. And so if you had a felony conviction, you basically just tried not to talk about it, don't mention it, and don't vote, don't register, even though the laws changed so that if you were no longer under the Department of Corrections, you could go register and vote. And people were very scared to come forward. And I remember taking phone calls and talking to people at the counter, and it's like, if you're here, you're good. Let's get you in.
Yeah.
Come back. You have a voice. We want people to be part of our communities. We want to engage in a positive manner. And that is one of those ways to come back and be engaging in a positive way. And to just be able to say, this is the law, this is where it's at, you're good, nobody's coming to your door, it's okay, let's do this. It really makes a difference in people's lives.
Right.
Because they're coming back to a process that they didn't feel welcomed them.
Right. And we talk about rehabilitation, right? You're facing the consequences of your decision. And then when you come out, we're giving so many barriers for you to engage in what society deems a normal or a good life. And then you can't even participate in this, or you think you can't, or we're going to make it harder for you. It's just another part of sort of that vicious cycle of the ways in which our most vulnerable are living right now.
Right. You mean because if you had drug addiction and it took you down a path where you became involved with the law, and then you reconciled all of that and came back, you now want to vote in support of healthy systems and community support. You want to vote on that. And you can't because you know that those services are needed in your community, but you can't put your voice towards it. It seems a little. It seems like it's a continued punishment. Right. When we need to allow the movement forward. Right. And pass that.
Yeah, so. And we can do so many things to make sure that that's done appropriately and safely. And all of that. I think that there's a lot of fear too, and just social norms around oh gosh, that person must be scary, or we shouldn't be able to trust them. But it's like, how many people I know that have gone down, clients and friends that have gone down routes that in that moment I would have been like, yeah, dude, you need to definitely get some help, right? But now they are the most amazing people and have such amazing insight into their life, and their voice is so important. Like, man, that would be a disservice to the whole community to not hear your voice.
Absolutely. And who are we to create barriers?
Right. Exactly.
I think you have to really look at your elected role and determine, are you working towards the positive, or are you working for the status quo to just keep, certain people out, or certain groups out, or certain knowledge out? Because politics in itself becomes divisive, but we as people want to come together. And so, I look at a lot of how we're interacting in different organizations, how we're interacting in our different communities. And I'm actually seeing a lot of people stepping up now and saying, no, I want better. I want better. I want us to provide great services. I want us to engage with people. I don't want us to leave anybody behind. And, we have amazing lawmakers. That's why we elect them. We have fantastic leaders. We have other leaders we can get into office.
Right.
I think we're in a pivotal year where this year is really going to determine where we're moving ahead to.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I feel it. I feel it.
And everybody's like, it's an odd year. Nobody's going to vote. No, you're going to vote. Because this is, every year is important, and every vote is important.
Yeah.
And it's okay to remember that. It's okay to come back to it and be like, ooh, I forgot.
Right.
But I'm going to come back to the process. It's okay. We want everybody over here.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, to keep your time in mind, because I don't want to I could talk to you. I have all kinds of questions. But we'll keep it at that for today.
Okay.
So I really, really, really appreciate it. I think that the community needs to hear what you have to say. And education and just the in-depth aspect and the passion, I think, is super important. So,
well, thank you so much for the invitation. I love doing this.
Yes.
So yes, and everybody call, because we could go on for hours, and I do think that every time we talk about it, it's another way of us, here.
Yes.
What can we do? How can we be together?
Yeah.
We do agree on these topics, and
I totally agree.